Hey everyone, it's Istebrak. Today I wanted to talk about stylizing realism again, and I wanted to talk about stylizing realism by using a reference. So really, if you look at this painting, you wouldn't really consider it stylization in the traditional sense. So there aren't any major proportion changes or anatomical changes, but technically it is stylized. It is a deviation in many areas from the contrast required to pull off a realistic painting, from the detail level, the rendering level. So it is a definite stylization in my terms, at least. So I've changed a lot of the contrast levels around the eyes, mostly to do with the eyelids, the lower eyelids especially. I found that the lower eyelids worked as a border, like a dam kind of contrast. It didn't allow the contrast or made too much contrast happen between the cheek area, the upper cheek, and the rest of the eyeball at the top. So I kept contrast high around the top side to exaggerate the cast shadow and to look at the eyes as an objective form instead of invite a more symbolic representation of the eyes by using the lower eyelid. So you see the lower line of the eyelid, the lower eyelid line, it makes you very susceptible to think in symbols. So I had seen a painting that inspired me where the person who painted it barely used any contrast on the lower eyelid, pushing further, even like insult to injury, I guess, pushing further the dependency on the sculpture and seeing what you can pull off without using one of the eyelids. So of course the eyelid is still there, but technically the line isn't there, the amount of contrast, the radial shading, the full outline, the full definition of the form and its projection off the face for the lower eyelid, it's all gone. It's gone more than I usually do in my paintings. I usually have a really accented, almost makeup level, smoky eyeshadow kind of lower eyelid presence. But in this painting, because it was a male and because I wanted to explore not an androgynous face, but as you can see, the reference is a very feminine looking male, so I wanted to pull that off. I didn't want to make it too masculine or too feminine. I wanted what he had in his face. That's why this painting inspired me. And so to step away even further from that lower eyelid contrast is another way to step away from the excess femininity that comes with over detailing the lower eyelid, that cat eye shape that comes in the eye. Using the lower eyelid, I wanted to focus more on the weight, to transfer the weight to the upper half of the eyeball, to help the contrast added by the eyebrows, to smudge as much as possible to reflect the texture of the light source, the texture of the area. As you can see, whatever detail I add to the lower eyelid, I completely blend it away with my smudge tool. And if you haven't picked up the smudge tool yet for your painting, please do. I'm going to be releasing some smudge tools very, very soon. Some smudge brushes on scatter, some of my own design, all of my own design, and I think they'll kind of express exactly what I'm going for, so you'll get that exact effect, that smoky, fuzzy bloom effect that I have while still maintaining your edge work. So that's definitely one of the reasons why this painting, the texture is so successful, is because of the constant smudging at different stages. The smudging never stops. Of course, you still have to block in your early, preliminary geometries, but once you're done with that, every new asset that's added to the painting, every tiny little artifact of shadow has to pass through the smudge filter. Just like if you were smudging and painting with charcoal or pencil, nothing is a raw brushstroke. Nothing is raw pencil on the paper. Everything has to be addressed in gradations and variations in its intensity and its visibility and its sharpness, because too quickly, far too quickly, do we see an interruption of the focal point when one thing has a bit more detail than the next, especially if we have a really nice smudged plate of color and values on. So this was definitely a stylization, and stylizing realism at this point is that the stylization is guided by your knowledge of fundamentals. So these are the stylizations I have been exploring. I guess I have a good language of fundamentals, enough to teach them anyway, so I felt I was ready to challenge myself a little bit, refusing certain fundamentals and refusing certain details and requirements, and exaggerating others. So the eyebrow and the texture of the eyebrow are completely exaggerated. I completely omitted the lashes. The eyelid creases on the top half of the eye, so they're very dark, as you can see, compared to the painting, only because I allowed the lower eyelids to be so light and so free. At this point, you see I'm adding that haze again. Another trick to keep the eyelids out of the picture and leave the upper eyelids to carry the weight and the function of the mechanics of the eye. Typically, the lower eyelid doesn't blink that much. It's the upper eyelid that blinks the most, so you'd still pull off that feeling that if you breathe life into the painting, it would still be able to blink and breathe. And that's kind of how you stylize. You stylize around rules that you can break. You stylize around mechanics that aren't really as present as other mechanics nearby. So the lower eyelid compared to the upper eyelid, the shine on the nose compared to the shine on the forehead, the presence of the cheekbones for male characters. So he has very strong cheekbones, very circular and effeminate. But I decided to get rid of those. Again, I don't want too much femininity in the face, but I want enough that it's still a likeness. The darkness I just added over the nose, that's another stylization. It's something you can get away with that's sourced off blush in the real world. When you get flushed, you kind of get a redness around the nose. I added that, and I added no lights around the eyes at all. I kept very, very minimal detail around the lips. I really took my time to make sure that I got the texture that I wanted, minimizing contrast anywhere where there is low mechanics and maximizing contrast around high mechanics. That's one way to stylize realism. So explore it. Find some areas. Typically on a face, mechanics are limited. You just have the blinking eyes, and the nose sometimes can flare up, or the mouth can sometimes move. But if you wanted to express silence, if you wanted to express movement in the mouth, you could lower contrast around the eyes and center that contrast and detail and focal presence around the mouth, and really exaggerate the contrast around the mouth. So that's stylizing realism, recentering and refocusing contrast. That's one way to break the rules. Make sure that you have enough studies behind you before you start experimenting like that. It is very tricky to get a hold of. But that's one of my tips. That's what I've been doing recently. Thank you so much for your patronage. You guys are amazing. Thank you. I'll see you guys next month. Bye.